Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And this episode, we wanted to talk about an element in video games that's very, very omnipresent now and has some deeper history that when we really think about it, and is one very near and dear to my heart, and that's voiceover.
Yes, a thing that Geoff actually does professionally.
Yep, indeed.
You haven't done for a video game, though, have you?
I did one browser game. This was just one of those like point and click kind of adventure games, and they needed like a very drunken bartender. So it's just like one of these kind of things coming through, and I attack the guy. And I apologize. It was like 6 lines. I can technically say I am a video game voice actor, but most of my voiceover work is like trailer stuff, commercials, e-learning videos, things like that. A lot of internal things.
Got it.
Want to do video games. I'll get there.
So funny story about the e-learning. One of the dudes in Cartridge Blowers in, I think, the movie subgroup, which is a group that me and Geoff are in on the Facebooks. I mentioned, we were talking about podcasts, and he mentioned like he was looking for recommendations and told me how he's been listening to Fun and Games, but he hasn't had a chance to listen to Screen Snark. But, you know, he's been wanting to ask if you did any e-learning tapes because he swears that his training videos have your voice.
Oh my God.
So I don't remember what business it's for, but I have to connect you with him. But I thought it was hilarious. I was like, it probably is.
I definitely sound like the kind of guy you'd hire for that.
Right.
And I've done a good number, and so I don't remember all of them, but there's a couple I remember. There's a few that I'm actually really proud of that are like very social justice and very forward. I'm just like, I'm very happy to be here right now.
That's awesome.
But anyway.
But yeah, so my thought to bring up this topic was I recently, as of when we were recording, have purchased Final Fantasy IX on the Switch because I've played it on two other occasions trying to finish it and like played like the first hour and then stopped. And I don't even really know why. I think it's because I always tried to play it post-generation. So like I never played it during the PS1 era because I did the same stupid thing with that game that I did with Wind Waker. I looked at the chibi graphics and went, it's a kiddie game. I'm not going to play that shit and because I'm an idiot.
A lot of us did that.
But now, and then I tried playing it later on the PS2, and then like a friend of mine just lent it to me recently, and I couldn't get past the beginning because also on a HD TV it looks very pixelated, blown up.
Mm-hmm.
But
it looked like that on a CRT too. It was like a definite achievement, but they were really pushing the PS1 hard on that one.
But when I bought it for the Switch recently, I was like, oh, now I'll finally be able to get through it because it's portable. And they did give it a nice glossy shine. They hadn't really changed that much. There's an autosave feature that sort of works, I think, just when you enter and leave areas. And then there's also, like, they put a shine or they didn't smooth them, but they, like...
They filtered it a little.
They filtered the sprites so they look a lot sharper and they're easier to see on the backgrounds. Like,
yeah, I like the sprites. I don't like what they did with the font, and I know I'm not alone in that, but beggars choosers.
Right. But while playing earlier today, I was reading the text of Zidane talking to Dagger and going, I have a voice for them in my head, but you know, if they were voice acted today, they might not sound like what I imagine them to sound like. And it made me think about how, like, in the old games, there was barely even any text, so let alone voice. But then once there started being more RPGs and games with large narratives, there were lots of dialogue, but no voice. Sprites and beeps and boops, but no voices. And it wasn't until the PlayStation N64 generation that we started getting voice acting or voices that weren't necessarily saying things. And I think it's really interesting to follow the trajectory of voice acting because I feel like putting voices in video games evolved faster than maybe the hardware and the story writing was to support it.
Yes. Voice acting, I feel like has had a lot of crests and waves. And even before there was the space in Red Book audio and things like that for voice clips, because it certainly takes up a lot of space. You know, when they were doing music on cartridge-based software, a lot of it was essentially MIDI. That's the easiest way to put it. It wasn't recorded music. It was computer data.
Yeah.
And so the best you could pull off were some like voice samples. One of the classics is Sinistar, Beware I Live,
Yeah.
coming through. One that a lot of people might remember is from Pokemon Yellow, where they were able to actually digitize Pikachu.
Right.
And one that is near and dear to my heart is Bad Dudes for the NES, where, they really blew the budget on at the end of every single level. You'd hear the same digitized. I can't even do it right because I have to but it's just like, I'm bad. And then run that through 6 phone lines and a cell phone filter and then digitize it. And that's how good it sounds. But yeah, it was the prevalence of CD audio when you could really start getting dialogue going on. And everybody went at it a little differently. I mean, that's kind of what the 32-bit, 64-bit era was. Everyone being like, all right, we got 3D. We got a lot of space. What do we do?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't occur to me at the time as a kid because while I've always been a gamer and a gamer nerd, I didn't really think of the repercussions of the game industry until I was much older. But turning on Mario 64 for the first time and that floating head popping up and saying, "It's-a me, Mario," that's the first time Mario ever had a voice, ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
Oh my God, it can't be overstated what that was.
Yeah, and now the same man has been doing that voice forever and has been received a Guinness Book record for having voiced the most video games as the same character also. But on the other end of it for the N64, you had something like Banjo-Kazooie where there were voices. Every character had a voice, but they said nonsense. They didn't say actual words. They made noises and the words scrolled on screen.
Yeah, they essentially did sort of a Simlish / vocal Foley.
Yeah.
And the folks of Rare that went on to Playtonic carried that through to ukulele.
Yeah, which is a relatively recent release. And then on the other end, in around the same the same time, the PlayStation had tons of voice acting in the Mega Man X games. They had it, which arguably was not great. And then of course,
Mega Man 8 was worse than X4.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
Whatever the actor was doing for Dr. Light didn't work. Like he had his fingers in his mouth the whole time.
The world may never know, and we will always ask, oh my God.
But it's infamous now how bad the voice acting was and the acting, because there were live action scenes in Resident Evil. Resident Evil, and that's talking about the script writing and story writing still not necessarily being done by good writers. It's laughable how bad that voice acting is, to the point where people idolize it,
Well, and a lot of that actually comes from the localization.
Yeah.
There was a fantastic YouTube video from the Stop Skeletons from Fighting channel that they were doing a series called How the West Was Worse. And it talks about the things that are lost or the things that happen when a game is brought over from Japan to America. And one of their more recent ones was Capcom, and they talked about the Resident Evil series and the fact that the script wasn't really localized. It was very literally translated and then given to the voice actors. It's why you get lines such as, "It may come in handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you." One of the most venerated lines from that first game.
Right.
There are so many better ways to read that. We as non-translators, as non-writers, can look at that and go, I can think of 3 right now. But
right.
They didn't put a ton of resources behind that. And that was very prevalent in that era. If you want to have a really fun 7 minutes, look up 50 worst voice acting in video games, something around those lines. And I'm sure there's a bunch of them now, but there's one in particular. It's got so many views. It is 7.5 minutes, and it is 90% PS1 games.
Yeah.
Deservedly so.
My go-to for worst voice acting, before we move on to the growth and evolution of this, is House of the Dead 2. House of the Dead 2 has some of my favorite voice acting ever because it is just non sequiturs and one-liners, and bad ones at that.
And none of them are connected emotionally.
No, it's very much, don't go in there. Oh, no. It's just... Ugh, it's the best.
Oh my God, yeah. And again, there is a certain cheesiness to it all.
Yeah.
These were also the days of when you wanted anime to be with subtitles, you had to import it. People subtitled it themselves, and anything that had a proper dub or anything else was expensive.
Yep.
I remember being in like a DVD store. I wanted to get Cowboy Bebop, which is a great dub, fantastic, superlative even. And each individual disc was $30. There were 6 episodes on a disc.
Wow.
And any other TV show, any other movie was at least 20%, 30% cheaper. But it was just the tax on that. And so that was a very awkward growing pains time where a lot of things happened at once.
Yeah, I mean, also for a long time, I'm fairly well known as a voice actor nerd at this point amongst my friends, and that there are names that we throw around that are ubiquitous with gaming now, like Jennifer Hale and Mark Meer and many others. Charles Martinetti, like we mentioned earlier, who literally is the Mario brothers, the Wario brothers. I don't know that they're actually brothers.
The Wario crew,
but like. All of them, and I think he's not Toad. Someone else is Toad. Like
he's not Toad. He might be Yoshi.
Oh, maybe he is like literally like most of the Mushroom Kingdom, which is astonishing.
No, he is. I'm looking it up. He's all forms of Mario, Luigi, Wario, Waluigi, and Toadsworth.
Oh,
he is a specific Toad.
Oh, Toadsworth, right? Okay, but like back when gaming first started branching into voice acting, there weren't a ton of names that were well known. I mean, think about also like PC games. Like everyone knows John St. John now, who's the voice of Duke Nukem. But I don't really feel like anybody did back in the day. But literally, like that's a game where it was super cheesy, but that was the point. It was an unevolved, very chauvinistic, ridiculous, campy thing. But that was definitely intent, to be that ridiculous versus something like Resident Evil, which I guarantee the actors in the booth were like, well, this is what we got. Let's give it our all. Like,
right.
Doing the best with what they've got.
It's similar to how a lot of people that I know have a very soft spot for David Hayter's portrayal of Solid Snake and Big Boss.
Of course, yeah.
And also, yeah, PC gaming is definitely one where, again, they had CD audio to work with and a much bigger playground, as it were. And so they had voice clips far earlier. But a lot of PC gaming was kind of spread around. Studios could pop up anywhere. And so a lot of times they would use nearby actors. So you would get stage actors, you would get local commercial actors, things of that nature. And maybe people made a bigger career out of it or eventually moved to LA, but it wasn't as like city or coast centralized as it is today. And it's kind of interesting the stuff you get from it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, also thinking about the PC and its evolution versus the other consoles and how now there's a ton of overlap because of Steam and other indie game platforms. There's a lot of overlap. But like think about Blizzard back in the day with especially StarCraft 1, how every unit said something when you clicked on them. And then there were the dialogue still screens where the characters would interact and talk. Like the guy who's been voicing Raynor has been voicing Raynor for a long time.
Oh my God, yeah, he has.
And, and the idea that now, and that's why I think like, while some jump from previous versions to current, there's like a disconnect or a jump. I never felt that with Blizzard because they always had high quality voice acting from back in the day. So when we got StarCraft 2 and like there were full cutscenes with voice acting and characters moving around on screen, it just felt natural, a natural extension of what they had already been doing for so long.
Well, I think, too, because Blizzard has, for a very long time, not just in their voice acting, but in a lot of their design, they are very stylized in one way or another. You're not going to call the original Warcraft dialogue good, but it suits the setting, it suits the characters, it's great. Diablo 1, not great voice acting, but by gum, it is melodramatic as hell, and it's great. It suits what they're doing, and then as things caught up and they keep their stylization going on, it creates a more consistent through line, and it feels like a natural evolution.
Yeah, for sure. And then like when going from PS1 to PS2 and then the creation of the Xbox and going to the GameCube, like that's when we really start to see things really grow. I mean, first of all, the GameCube was like definitely an underrated juggernaut with the Resident Evil remake and Resident Evil 4, both which had phenomenal graphics and voice acting. And then, of course, you take Halo, which is this legacy that has created this, story with Master Chief and that iconic voice in Cortana that have been around for ages. And then with the PS2 era, like what was really cool for me growing up playing the PS2 is I became an anime nerd around that time. I'd been watching Dragon Ball Z and some other stuff for a while before, but it wasn't until that era that also a lot of anime became very accessible in the States because there were a lot of professional dubs in the States with English voice actors. And so you'd get games like Full Metal Alchemist or the Lupin the Third game or any of the Dragon Ball Z Budokai games where they had the same voice acting that was in the cartoons, but now with like 3D models and these elaborate storylines. And it was like awe-inspiring, even though you go back and look at it now and it's kind of cheesy and not that well made. At the time, it just was mind-blowing that things that we're used to seeing on TV, we could now play in a game.
And I think actually the animation to video game route in those days aged a lot better than more like, I guess, dyed-in-the-wool video game franchises. Like, I mean, we bring this, you brought this subject up with Final Fantasy IX, and the next entry in the Final Fantasy series was the first one with voice acting. And it shows off the fact that there can be great writing, but it reads better than it speaks. Or the amount of time it may take to hear those words is different from what you hear in your head or what you may read. Final Fantasy VI, great game. I don't know if I'd ever want it to be fully voiced. Same goes for Chrono Trigger. There's a lot of like text dumps that go on, which is fine to read, but if you had somebody like rattling that off, you'd skip the cutscene immediately.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And like I'm currently also I bought the Final Fantasy X and X-2 HD collection on Steam.
Awesome.
Because I forgot it was coming out on the Switch. Anyway, and so I've been playing through that, and like there are definitely tons of scenes where like I'm super into it. Like what I love about it is Titus, whatever. I love his narration. That the whole game is him thinking back on the events that happened, and his narration is really tight. But then there are scenes where the characters are interacting where I'm like, what am I listening to now? And a lot of that I think is just the reads and just the way it was written, because all of the voice actors are in there were professionals, a lot of them who had been doing animation voices for a while.
Yeah, it really wasn't anyone's first rodeo.
Right. And but some of the things seem weird to me now. Like Yuna's very soft spoken and some of her lines are really great and beautiful, and some others are kind of disjointed and odd. Meanwhile, there are other characters like Waka who he's such a walking cliche, but I love every word that comes out of his mouth.
So, and again, at that point, we were all blown away by the graphics at the time.
Right.
But again, you look back on what it was very stilted in animation.
Yeah.
And there is something to be said for the physical and the verbal, I guess, and the voice, the spiritual. And when you have very stilted emotions going on, you can have the most emotive voice acting going on, but it's going to sound a lot more melodramatic when you basically have little wooden dolls shaking around.
Yeah, I mean, I can safely say now, calling back to our Kingdom Hearts episode, I have now played and completed Kingdom Hearts, and I won't spoil it, even though there is a spoiler at the very end of the game that makes me very angry that we will cover sometime on the show.
I'll have to play it. I was gonna anyway.
The really cool thing to see is, so the graphics are so phenomenal now that watching Sora interact with especially the Pixar movies, like it's like he literally stepped into the movie. And even like the Pirates of the Caribbean world, the gritty realism works really well. They designed it in a way that just doesn't look phony.
They've gotten good at it.
And
yeah.
so, but then going back and looking at old clips of Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, it's exactly that. It's a lot of standing around and talking, whereas in Kingdom Hearts 3, they're running all over, the voice act, like the scenes are created like mini movies instead of like this cutaway in-engine thing where they have to stand there and, talk at you. There's not a lot of that anymore. Talking about my other gaming podcast on this network, Reignite, MJ and I crack jokes all the time about the Mass Effect turn. For the uninitiated, or for those who want clarification who have played the games, what I call the Mass Effect turn is whenever you're doing everything, for the most part, in the Mass Effect games is in-engine, everything that's happening. There are a few cutscenes that are CG, like separate, that isn't using the in-game models, but for the most part, it's all in-game. And every conversation you have is usually between two people facing each other. And something that happens more often than not, because they had no idea how to script the movement for these cutscenes, is whenever you finish a dialogue with someone, they stop talking while looking at you, turn to the right, and then walk off. Almost every time, like clockwork. And it's hilarious to me. And I just make fun of it now, but the reality is they wanted this stuff to be an engine. They need the character to not be standing in front of you when the cutscene ends if they move off, if they're not part of that area normally. So that's how they did it. And they
exit stage left.
Yeah, and it's hilarious. But again, that comes from, the voice acting being imperative while the design may not be able to support it necessarily. When you have pre-rendered cutscenes, then it doesn't matter because everything happens in the pre-rendered cutscene and then you're back to square one with the character you're controlling after the fact. But if you want to do stuff in engine, which became more and more prevalent, especially in the PS3, Xbox 360 years, they had to do things like that, which I think is very funny. And meanwhile now, with the PS4, Xbox One, Switch era, like we've more or less hit the pinnacle of graphics. I'm sure it can still get better, but like for the most part, they can do anything now. And so I feel like we're finally at a place where like we can get so experimental with the voice acting because there are no limitations to how you display it. So you can really be kept in the moment. I think that's one of the things I liked most about Kingdom Hearts 3, even though it is a flawed game, is that I never felt thrown out of the moment. I did feel halted by a lot of the cutscenes because it felt very stop and go, but that wasn't because of the transitions, because the transitions were fluid as hell, where literally a cutscene would happen, and as the cutscene's happening, the camera would naturally kind of float past Sora till you were behind him, and then you're in the action. Like, it was really brilliantly done.
And these are the things that designers are learning as the generations and years and projects go on. Something that seemed counterintuitive at the time is now second nature. And you're right. The last generation was definitely the one where we were really pushing for everything must be in engine. And we also allow customization, which means we have to figure out how to make all of this emotive while you've made your member of the Third Street Saints with a big clown wig and 7 feet tall. And, oh, God.
Well, yeah, that's something that's been really funny to me also, is like back in the day playing old school games that had costumes, customizable outfits. Like take a Spider-Man game from the PlayStation 2 generation. Whatever custom costume you're wearing, odds are, if it was a pre-rendered cutscene, you weren't wearing the costume in it. Whereas the new Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man for PS4, or even Kingdom Hearts, like in Kingdom Hearts, whatever Keyblade you were using, because they're all different, you get a bunch of different ones, are in the cutscene with you, in game. And same with Spider-Man, no matter what costume you're wearing, I think except for like one of the last cutscenes, because that one's pre-rendered.
Just about any of the other ones, yeah.
Every other cutscene in the game, if you're wearing Spider-Punk, you're Spider-Punk in that cutscene. If you're the Incredible Bagman, you're the Incredible Bagman in that cutscene.
And proud of it.
Right. And I think that's really great. And I think that's something that voice acting has done a lot of too, where there are not a lot of moments now where I think to myself, I'm watching someone act. It's gotten to the point where we are with a lot of TV and movies now, where I'm watching something going, I'm in this experience, I am a part of this experience.
Yeah, which gets me to sort of the downside of the voice acting and video game industry.
Right.
which is, I don't have a nice way of putting it all in one little neat bow. I suppose it could be encapsulated with the voice acting strike that went on over 2016 and 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of how voice acting is done in video games is one thing that needs to be kept in mind is just how much voice acting there is in games nowadays.
Yeah.
It was one thing when you're playing Gex for the PS1 and Dana Gould recorded over 300 lines, wonderful one-liners and zingers that you are going to get sick of.
Wait, is that true? Was Dana Gould the voice of Gex?
Yes.
I forgot about that. That's amazing.
I haven't. Oh my God. I still love that game, and I have a love-hate relationship with the voice acting in it, but I love the first Gex so much. And again, it's one thing when you play through The Legacy of Kain and get to hear Simon Templeton and Michael Bell do all of their big epic stuff, and Tony Jay, that massive motherfucker.
Oh, God.
May he rest in peace. But nowadays, you have open world games. You have RPGs. You have the vast sandbox landscape that we all want to draw that companies want to draw the gamers into, which means not only do you have storyline lines, you have reaction lines, you have vocal foley, all the grunts, gurs, breath sounds, and otherwise wordless sounds that you think of stereotypically in anime. Do that for a while. And then there is the permutations of said lines. One of the most recent ones is Yuri Lowenthal, the voice of Spider-Man in the PS4 Spider-Man game, has two completely different tracks of voice for every single line. There is normal and exertion. So he can deliver a line and it can seamlessly transition from when he jumps off a building and starts swinging, he's speaking normally, to speaking a little more like he's just doing something, and then he can get back up to where he's going and he catches his breath and it's fine. And because they are the same lines, same words, they can seamlessly go between them, which means with that one choice, that beautiful, immersive, verisimilitude dripping choice, his script doubled. And that's not even getting into just the sheer amount of lines that there are in games. Something like the first Mass Effect has approximately 300,000 words in it.
Wow.
Yes.
And that seems like a low number considering the later games, too.
Right. And in actuality, the other games aren't much higher.
Okay.
Granted, I am pulling this from Wikipedia.
Yeah, so take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, you told me about an hour and a half before we were recording that we were doing this subject. I got very excited, and I now have so many tabs open. I got receipts. Mass Effect 2 was the biggest one, according to Wikipedia, at 450,000. And that's words. 25,000 lines.
Wow.
Yes. And so that means anyone, and also to save money and to just for sanity's sake, one actor can be expected often to voice multiple characters. So it's not just breaking up those 450,000 words to, okay, you get this portion. It's now like cover this person. Even some of the major actors will cover auxiliary characters just while you're in there. And these are usually done in 4-hour shifts. Now, anybody that's worked a retail job or a job where you're on your feet, you think 4 hours is super easy. And in some cases it is. And in other cases, when your entire livelihood is based on your voice. I last week recorded a movie trailer for a project that I am a part of. So it was a very in-house thing. And I did a couple of different takes for them, and they wanted to hear like a Don LaFontaine style trailer guy. So I spent about 10 minutes
speaking like this the entire time.
Oh, God.
Running through the lines and bringing it forth to you.
And my throat was hurting after 10 minutes of it. Now, imagine voicing a Dragon Ball Z character
and screaming for hours.
Yeah.
But also a lot of these people, even if they're doing very calm characters, if they're a player character, they have to do a lot of hurt sounds. They have to do a lot of screaming. They have to do a lot of exertion. And depending upon how much strain this puts on your voice, even if it's just your own natural speaking voice, talk for 4 hours. See where it gets you. And it's a lot of strain and wear and tear. And the way that the video game industry is, there's a lot of weird closed doors.
Mm-hmm.
When you are working on a project, you don't necessarily know the name of your character. You don't necessarily know the name of the project. I mean, you might know the name of your character depending upon how dialogue goes, but everything is under code names. And there's a lot of NDA stuff, and nothing of what you get is based on sales of the game. If you film a commercial, record a commercial as a voice actor, as a union voice actor, you bet you're getting residuals on that. It's one of the reasons why it's so lucrative and such a good thing to do.
Right.
And how it can provide a livelihood for people like me in the industry. That feels really good to say, by the way. I am a guppy in this pond, but I have thoughts.
That's
and
fair.
Especially because this is the shit I aspire to.
Right.
And a few episodes ago, we were talking about crunch time on development of games. And this is another aspect of, well, we can get this amount of work out of you. There was a strike that happened between SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, and video games, essentially. A lot of different companies, including, I want to say, Warner Brothers and Activision and Take-Two. And unfortunately, the big problem is SAG, as a union, provides that sort of protection, that sort of bartering, that sort of everything for all actors. Screen, film, television, radio, internet, video games, animation. And video games, while big to a lot of us and big budget stuff, is only a small portion of what the Screen Actors Guild covers. It's SAG-AFTRA these days, but it's SAG. So there was a certain amount of like pushing back and people need this and this is what we're doing and everything else. But there was no give on residuals for game sales. And it was essentially like fanatical levels of pushback on we are not giving actors that. Whereas, again, as you said, we almost can't imagine games now without these actors.
Yeah.
And when the strike happened, they instead hired non-union actors at a much higher rate than they were paying the union actors. They hired scabs.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I am speaking as a non-union actor. Right now, that is where I am best situated. I get the best work that I can, and I am not against the union. I am, in fact, very for it and look forward to the day when that is a good choice for me. However, the fact that they can then turn around and offer more money to just bring in non-union people shows that they can do that. And there are levels of profit, but this is also back to the very idea of video game developers need to unionize in order to fight these sort of conditions that go on. And there was some give. There was some compromise that went on. There was, rather than residuals, there was compensation to a voice actor in a union game based on number of sessions booked, which also was exponential. Because something like Kevin Conroy voicing Batman in the Arkham games was 40 hours, approximately. And that is 2 4-hour sessions a day with an hour break in between for 5 days.
Wow.
And then actors would come in and do pickups. And again, Kevin Conroy has been playing Batman since, 1993?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. And one of the big selling points of the Arkham series was it's Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill. You got Batman and the Joker. And then Kevin Conroy has to record hundreds, thousands of lines and versions of each one of them and sounds and Foley and exertion. And then you throw that onto an admittedly stilted Batman model. You compare to how everybody moves and acts in Arkham City and Arkham Knight versus Batman himself. And a probably exhausted Kevin Conroy, who probably put in a very good performance, just feels tired and flat on that character. And I don't know what conclusions to draw from that, but I'm angry.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the problem that we see with the games industry all over the place is its youth breeds some semblance of ignorance to one degree or another. And it's a bummer. And I think also with voice acting, the thing is tons of production houses will actually go out of their way to hire as few people as possible. I mean, look at Skyrim, which is a massive game that I love, but there are like 3 voice actors in that game. I mean, I exaggerate. There are probably a handful, but like, you know, you can pair off the female characters and the male characters in groups because a lot of them sound very similar. Because they were just trying to get the game made and out, and they weren't as concerned about the individuality of townsperson A and townsperson B.
Right. It was just, all right, give them a voice. That way this all adds up together. And again, you can get an actor to do 4 or 5 different voices. In particular, if you're just doing a couple of small characters and a few lines, so you can make very big, bold choices and not have to maintain them. Because again, something that a lot of people thought is put into it. Let me say that first. But not like the full consequences put into the thought of like, look at these voices that people can do. Look at these voices that can be done. And now consider, do those voices for 2 hours, for 4 hours. Take an hour break. Come back and do them again.
And if you want to be big and gruff the entire time, I can maybe maintain this for about an hour. And then after that, it's diminishing returns.
And if you want that, that's shit. But there is not a lot of oversight on what goes on. And that is an evolving thing. And I would love to come back to this episode years from now, a year, 2 years, whatever, and be so happy that conditions are better, that the business playing field is a little more open. And that's not just the thing of like voice. Listen, as far as being an actor goes, voiceover is your best paycheck for your time.
Right.
But it is still a demand. And it still is. I always put it as when people talk to me about being a voice actor, I go, it's nice work if you can get it. And sometimes you book a few things that pay for half your year. And sometimes you're in between stuff. And there is also the fact that there's residuals on commercials and stuff that gets play like that. And there's that sort of thing written into contracts for animation, but not really for video games. And it's a wonderful environment, and it's one that I aspire to, but it gives me pause.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's legit. And I think being a voice actor nerd as much as I am, I've watched a lot of content about the animation industry, which went through its own version of this at one point. And
oh, yes. It was a while ago, but it did.
Right. And, you know, listening to people like Rob Paulson and Maurice LaMarche and Joe DiMaggio and John DiMaggio, not Joe DiMaggio, that's the baseball player, John DiMaggio and Billy West, like all talk about that stuff and how, you know, they would kind of get chuffed when celebrities would wander into a movie or animation studio, spout a few lines, get a big check because they were already live actor famous. And
there was, star power.
And get overlooked. And, you know, there was a lot of that gimmicky stuff in video games as well. I mean, thankfully, some of them do quality work, you know, like as much as everyone likes to pick on Jack Black for his voice for Poe in the Kung Fu Panda movies, when he did Eddie Riggs in
Brutal
Legend, he was phenomenal in that game.
He was fantastic.
You know, and also like that's
full Tenacious D. It was great.
Think about that game, which had Ozzy Osbourne, David Bowie, Rob Halford, like
Let Me Kill Mister.
So many incredible musicians doing VO work and a ton of really great VO work. Is pretty incredible. I think Tim Curry is in there somewhere too. You know,
well, Tim Curry's been doing VO and he's been doing live action video game acting as well. One of the clips that I always like to watch when I want to feel better about the world is him in Command and Conquer.
Oh, yes.
As like the nod leader. It's like, I'm going to the one place uncorrupted by capitalism, space. And the view of him trying not to laugh brings joy to my heart.
Classic. Yeah. It's one of those things where voice acting, I'm always really excited when it's done really well in games. But there are other games where it's like, look at the scope of Red Dead Redemption 2, which we've talked about before, and how we were already sour on some other stuff about that company. But like, think about the man hours they have to put voices and a ton of unique voices in a game like that. Or it's why there was so much trouble with LA Noire, which was a game that revolutionized voice acting, because all of the voice actors in that had to do live acting as well, like on-screen acting, because
a lot of the mocap work,
because of the mocap work. And like, transitions like that will only become more regular within gaming as we continue forward.
I mean, Nolan North did plenty of that as Nathan Drake.
Yes, that's also true.
And but you're right. LA Noire was definitely one of the big ones.
Yeah.
That did that, and it's the kind of thing where you look at this landscape and you go, well, can studios afford to pay their developers, pay their actors, pay their everything else this fee? Well, they can't afford it. Well, then maybe they shouldn't be forcing these hours or forcing this stuff. Like that. You look at something like that, and the system is broken.
Yeah.
Fundamentally.
Absolutely.
Games are still coming out, but the system is broken.
Yeah. And, I think at the end of the day, there are still plenty of games that come out with text that are incredible. I mean, all of Shovel Knight is text, and there's tons of emotion in the writing in that game.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Something like The Messenger as well. These are games that just have text, or even something like Octopath Traveler, which has a ton of voice acting, but there are still moments that are just text as well.
And it's more, I don't want to call it auxiliary, but more exclamatory text.
Right.
Or exclamatory voice acting.
Right. And like, some of the voice acting in Octopath Traveler is some of the more emotional voice acting I've seen in a turn-based RPG. And what's really fascinating about that is it's old school styled with text boxes and voice acting.
Yeah, and something that I've loved about the last 5 to 10 years of gaming, big studios, indie studios alike, is the idea that not everybody has to be chasing the bleeding cutting edge.
Yep.
And you don't have to have every single line voiced. You can have text. You can have retro graphics. You can have a step back in graphics. You can be highly stylized. And not everything has to be pushed to its nth degree. People still do that, and this is how we evolve. But we also evolve by spreading out. And it's nice that there is still a place in games for stuff like Octopath Traveler or Shovel Knight.
Yeah. And then, of course, there are some games that I think if there were voice acting in it, people would riot, like the Zelda franchise, whereas...
Yet there was.
There was in the newest one.
Yeah.
And I believe when the Skyward Sword had as well, but not Link. Link is still the
Link doesn't talk.
He just makes noises. And I think
right.
That's really fascinating also, and was a turnoff for a lot of people, myself included, is like some of these weighty cutscenes where Zelda is divulging all of this information and frustration, and Link just stands there stoically. And like, I get it. I get that he's the sounding board and he's there for her and like he's listening and he's intent, but it does feel weird. Whereas in Mario Odyssey, it never feels weird because though Mario never specifically talks to anyone in dialogue, it's often very small moments of talking, not these giant long cutscenes with tons of VO.
Right. And something like Mario has much more of a, it doesn't often get dramatic in the same way that Zelda does or tries to.
Yeah. Also, just an anecdote based on you talking about voice actors having to do grunts and action noises, essentially. One of my favorite featurettes on the Wolverine Origins game, which was voice acted by Hugh Jackman and was way better than the movie, there's a featurette about him being in the booth having to do all of the fighting noises and the grunting and the yelling, and it's just amazing to watch.
It really is.
It's just wonderful. And then, another thing, like we talked about Jennifer Hale earlier, who is known for so many characters, of course, my favorite being Femshep, but she is actually the only canonical voice of Samus. Because
That's
the
true.
only time Samus ever had a voice, we're not counting Ninja Theory, they suck, is in the Metroid Prime series, where she doesn't talk, but she grunts and makes noises, and like there's battle sounds, but she never actually speaks. And I believe she signed on to continue to play Samus in the fourth one, which is coming out eventually.
Which is very exciting.
Yes.
And thinking on Jennifer Hale, I like to think of one of my favorite little anecdote things of how far priorities and things have come in voice acting. We'll go back to a series I never stopped talking about, Metal Gear Solid.
Yes.
Where Jennifer Hale was also an actress. She was Naomi Hunter, as well as a few other characters, I believe.
Right.
And when they recorded they did Metal Gear Solid, which was, I mean, you want to talk about little wooden dolls shaking while voices happen, and we just felt it so much.
I know.
But when they made the remake, the Twin Snakes for the GameCube, David Hayter took a pay cut so that they could bring back everybody.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think there was one actor that couldn't come back, and I'm blanking. It's the one who voiced the ninja. So Rob Paulson is the voice of the ninja.
Amazing.
He is. And you hear it, and you go, oh, shit, it is, isn't it? Like, it's, you gotta have to, like, squint and turn your head, but it's him. The man's got a great voice, and he's very versatile.
Yeah.
But the reason why they had to re-record the dialogue in the first place is because with the better quality sound that the GameCube was putting out, it revealed all of the background noise that went on during recording sessions for Metal Gear Solid. People were recording in apartments.
Yeah.
And living rooms. And so when it was all turned up and like boosted and everything else, you could hear traffic and birds.
That's amazing.
So it became completely unusable. And I mean, there was a definite time of voiceover where it literally was you're working in the office, stick your head out like, hey, Larry, can you come in and be a guy for a minute? Okay. And that's how we got those voices. But yeah, it is a still evolving art form. Just as video games, this is still evolving art form, and I'm here for it. As angry as I am about a lot of developments, I'm still optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll always say I always welcome voice acting, but I don't know that it's always necessary.
Agreed.
Like, for example, I'm pretty sure I know there was no voice acting in the Curse of the Moon game, but the Bloodstained Curse of the Moon prequel game. But I'm confident that there is voice acting in the new Bloodstained game coming out later this year, the Switch release, the full release game. And
yeah, I think Ritual of the Night does have a cast.
And so I'm curious about that because, like, there is some dialogue with the main character who's one of the characters you can play in this prequel. And so I'm curious, like, this is a game series where I get to see that transition. Like, we talked about Mega Man earlier and how of all the voices I ever pictured for Mega Man, it was not the squeaky voice that we got in Mega Man 8, especially since the voice actor who plays Goku had been voicing Mega Man in the cartoon for all that time. So I was like, oh, we're going to get kind of like a deepish voice. No, he sounds like a 12-year-old boy.
Oh my God, it was Sean Schimmel, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Sure was.
I'm hearing it in my head. Oh my God, you're right.
Yeah, I made that connection. It wasn't until I had already been a Dragon Ball Z fan and a Mega Man fan, and then I bought the DVDs of the Mega Man series and went back to watch it, and I was like, wait a minute, I know that voice. My favorite game to play in gaming, and y'all at home can play along, it's called Find Stephen Bloom, because he's in everything. Games, animation, doesn't matter. He's in everything.
Well, the big joke that I love is Nolan North once in an interview was like, people ask me all the time, how do I break into animation, video game voiceover? Well, step one is waiting for me and Steve Bloom to die.
Yeah. Yeah, because they are literally in everything.
They're in so much. Now, I guess, there's all kinds of great voice acting. There's all kinds of cheesy voice acting that we love near and dear to our hearts. Mm-hmm. Matt, what is your favorite bad voice acting? It could be an entire game. It could be a character. It could be a line. What's your favorite?
Oh, that's tough. There's so many. I mean, like, he's not my favorite, but Barry from the first Resident Evil is an MVP. Like,
he is an MVP. He is on the All-Star team.
It's like, you were almost a Jill sandwich. Like,
I think my favorite out of that entire game is after Jill says there's something wrong with this house. Whoa!
This place is dangerous.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I mean, there's so many great bad voice acting moments. I mean, I think for me, because I was astonished that I was going to get to play a Mega Man game on PlayStation that had voice acting. The actor who played Dr. Light, Dr. Wywee, we have to stop Dr. Wywee.
Well, the fact that some of his lines, he actually stumbled on them.
Yeah.
Did they take one take, or was this the best they got?
Yeah. Like he, I think the actor who played, and I don't know if it was him or it was the studio or the writing, like who knows why, but it's laughably ridiculous. And it's easily one of my favorite terrible voice acting moments is probably Mega Man 8, only second to the best line ever in a Mega Man X game, which I believe was X4. When
is it 0?
It is 0. What am I fighting for?
That is X4.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah. That is easily 0 being one of my favorite Mega Man characters. But that moment when that happened, I went, "Oh no, oh no."
Dear.
So yeah, that's definitely mine.
And that was a very victim of like the anime style of like matching the lip flaps.
Yeah, of course, and they had to do that. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah. But this is just what happens.
What would be your favorite bad voice acting, Geoff?
All right. My, not my favorite, but the death MVP is Symphony of the Night.
I already know what you're going to say.
I know. No, but that one's just in general, like the entire opening conversation between Richter and Dracula, anything Alucard says, he's buttery smooth, but there's just it's nonsense.
It is nonsense.
It is absolute nonsense. But actually, I don't think we've ever discussed this game. It may be my absolute favorite just platter of what I don't even know what to do with this. Voice acting. Castle Shikigami 2 for the PS2.
Oh, I think we've talked about it off the air, but I don't think we've actually brought it up on the show.
It is a vertical shoot 'em up game, which is a genre that I have a particular weakness for. I'm not great at it, but I love it. And you can choose your character. And so you're not a ship. You're a floating anime boy or girl with a weapon. I don't fully understand this game. I don't. And I don't think I want to. And the thing is, you have conversations with the bosses before you fight them. And the dialogue is not always the same. It depends on the combination. If you go in with one character, they'll say, and the boss doesn't always say the same thing. Dialogue will happen based on who's there. And if you bring one character versus another character that's with them, because it's two-player co-op as well, the pair of characters will also bring different lines. And all of them are terrible and golden. It's amazing. It brings probably my favorite, out-of-context line ever. I like girls, but now it's about justice.
That's good. You explaining this game, which now I'll have to. I think I've seen video of it, but I'll have to watch more.
You'll have to come play it because I have it.
I have remembered my all-time favorite bad voice acting line. It's actually from an arcade game. And you're gonna
hit me.
You're gonna know what it is. It's from the first time you encounter Magneto in the X-Men arcade game.
Ah, yes.
Welcome to Die, which got a comeback in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 when
right.
Deadpool was in it. If you ever picked Deadpool to face off against Magneto, Deadpool would say that to Magneto, completely out of context.
Because that's what you should do.
Right. That might be my favorite. That's a definite case of it was probably that game might have even been Japanese actors just trying to say English word, trying to translate it.
I'm pretty sure it was.
And so, yeah, Welcome to Die is, it's all your base art belong to us, except that was all text. Imagine if that was VO.
Oh, I mean, there was a trance song made to it that had text to speech.
That's true. Yeah, I think that's a project that I would love to do. Maybe partner with one of my YouTuber friends, but maybe do a live action version of that. I can't even remember the name of that game.
Zero Wing.
Do a live action half-hour trailer or 10-minute trailer for zeroing the movie. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Oh my God! And the tagline would be "Take off every zig." No, it would be for great justice. What am I thinking?
Yeah, it would be
for great
for
justice.
Great justice. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've wasted everyone's time enough.
We could go back and forth on this forever, and I'm sure you can too, people.
Yeah, please hit us up on the social media with your favorite bad voice acting, favorite good voice acting, favorite voice actors. How do you feel about reading text versus voice acting? Do you prefer one to the other? Do you not care either way? You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We're, of course, on certainpov.com, which is the best place to find us because everything channels through there. We have a Discord server where you can interact with us regularly. We're often giving game recommendations and chatting with the other shows and listeners of the other shows. Or you can write us directly, funandgamespod@gmail.com.
Yes, please let us know. I think this episode, more than any other, let us know what you think. Let us know your favorites, your highs, your lows. We want to know. This is a conversation. Thank you for keeping it going. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.